Julie grabs my hand and she goes, there's something wrong. I was like, okay. And she's like, I have a tumor in my left armpit. And I know the cancer's back, but I couldn't fix it anymore. The fix it was over. And I rolled over. I had had enough. I was done. In the words of my 8-year-old son, I was cooked.
Welcome to the Men Talking Podcast. Great to have you guys here with us today. My name is Ken Baugh. I'm here with my good friend and co-host Dana Jorgensen. And in these first 2 episodes, we wanted to share a bit of our story with you guys so that you can just kind of know who we are, gives a little context around the things that we're going to be talking about in this podcast that are going to include marriage and personal life and faith and family and business and friendship and pretty much every issue, hopefully, that men have, being that, Dana, you and I have worked with men for many, many years, and I think have a pretty good take on what guys are going through and experiencing.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything new under the sun.
That's for sure.
You know.
And our story is a really important aspect for us to not only understand about ourselves, but in order to be known by others. We're going to be talking about vulnerability in relationships. And a lot of times, the reason people don't know us isn't a reluctance on their part. It's the fact that we just haven't been vulnerable. We haven't shared our story with them. And not everybody is a safe person to do that with, for sure. But today we want to talk about Dana's story and help you guys get to know him better. And yeah, so I think we should just jump right into it.
All right. Well, let's go.
Okay. So, I mean, let's just kind of start at the beginning, Dana. Where were you born and raised primarily? And, you know, what are some of the things in your early years of life that you think would be important for men to know?
Yeah. So I grew up in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, just about 3.5 hours east of Toronto. Very cold in the winter, but it gets pretty hot in the summer. It's kind of an interesting place, and we have a lot of lakes and different areas. And so I grew up fishing and hunting with my dad primarily. And then, as every good Canadian kid, I played a lot of hockey, a lot of indoor hockey and a lot of pond hockey in the winter. But yeah, kind of your typical Canadian childhood. We had a close family, though. So we had a lot of us. And actually, I just got back from Christmas, and it was up there, and it kind of continues that way. It's awesome. We have something that's not very normal, but when we were kids, and we continue this to this day, but I have a lot of cousins. And so when we get together now, gosh, there's upwards of 50 of us.
Wow.
But, you know, cousins and parents and grandkids and all these other things. And but we would get together as kids, and we would have, 4 or 5 families all together. And it was kind of neat. You know, we had a different childhood. There were still 25, 30 of us back then. We were a really close family, and I really still, cherish those memories of, like, I had a good childhood of a lot of really fun stuff. I also, on the, 2 things can be true at the same time. I had my dad and his 2 brothers, and then they had 3 sisters, so there's 6 kids in their family. My mom also had 6 kids in her family. On my dad's side, though, they're a family of, came from East Germany, and my grandmother, who currently still lives with my parents to today, she's 97, and she escaped East Germany. And so when she escaped East Germany and met my grandfather, who I didn't know, he died when I was 1, but he was a Danish nationalist, and so anyway, she ended up, meeting him and marrying him. And that got her out of basically Germany altogether and into Denmark. And then eventually they moved to Canada.
So she was in East Germany.
Yeah.
During the war,
Yeah. So, part of family history is not always beautiful. And I know our culture likes to shame a lot of people and beat people up for this stuff, but my grandfather, or my great grandfather, was forced to be an SS officer.
Wow.
And if he didn't, obviously my grandmother and all of her siblings and family would have been killed.
Yeah.
And so my great-grandfather actually owned a beer and Coke bottling plant. And they had a really beautiful store, and they owned a bunch of land in Germany and kind of all those things. And when the war happened, my grandmother was about 16, and only now, she's 97, does she really talk about it. In the last 5 years has she opened up to start having conversations about, because there's a lot of pain, and then attached to that, there's a ton of shame. And that generation, and then my parents' generation, they don't have the words to work through that,
No.
nor have they. And so my grandmother, not to her fault at all, has just sort of started to release some of that. And my sister has started doing stories on that. And we had a pretty cool family story last Christmas go viral. This bottling plant that our family used to own, there's nothing left. The Russians bombed the daylights out of our family's town in Rothenau, Germany. And there's nothing left. But my sister ended up kind of doing a ton of research and going over to Germany and putting out all these, hey, this was our family. Could we get some history? We're trying to figure out what actually happened to my great-grandfather. There's no documentation. He just disappeared. Wow. And that's different. That's weird. People didn't just disappear. It was actually well documented. The war is pretty well documented. And if somebody, was put in the firing line or committed suicide, like, it was noted. But he just disappeared. And so we ended up finding a bottle from the bottling plant and giving it to my grandmother last year. My sister found it, and we had it shipped over. And of course, it was just very emotional, very hard, but so, in a really weird way, healing for my grandmother to get a piece of her history. And so my sister has been taking steps with my grandmother and with my other sister to go over to Rothenau and to retrace our family steps and sort of get to know who the German people are that are part of our heritage.
This is important because our personal story is deeply rooted in our family story that goes back generations. Yeah. And I'm just sitting here as I'm listening to this because I didn't actually know this part of your story. I know a lot of your story, but this part I didn't. And just the trauma induced into your family system for generations has in some form or fashion been part of what has shaped you as well, even indirectly. And, I think for us to have an understanding of kind of the timeline of our life and our story really helps us to understand not only who we are, but actually to experience God's grace and presence in unique ways because of that, because he knows our story and all the things that have happened to us. So, man, thanks for sharing that.
I think a big part of it too, and we'll get to this part of my story, but when I went to Onsite, which is a kind of a counseling recovery center, and I went there for a week, they have you draw a family tree, and beside each person, there are symbols that they give you for trauma for that person. Once you go through the trauma of each person, then you come back and you do medicators. It's hard, but you start to look at your family tree and you go, well, no wonder.
Right.
And you start to develop this empathy for those people and go, well, of course they're mad, angry, sad, hurting, alcohol, drugs, money, whatever it is, right? You see that and you develop this empathy to go, oh, it's not that they're an alcoholic. It's not that they're an addict. It's that they're actually hurting. And it puts a lot of verbiage and a lot of grace in front of that. That doesn't take away the struggle of the dynamics and relationship and those other things. But what it does is it gives you some understanding to go there. And so anyways, that's sort of where that will come back to play. But that's sort of my family's lineage. And then my mom grew up in Southern California.
Okay.
And I haven't retraced as much of her steps. It's not as tied to World War II as much as my dad's side of our family is. But yeah, I grew up in Canada and it was wonderful. And so my dad and his brother, this is going to sound a little funky, but it makes sense in a minute. My dad and his brother and my mom and her sister, so 2 brothers and 2 sisters, both married and had a double wedding.
Wow. Sounds like a Hallmark movie.
It's very different. And so they had 4 boys, and so I have 4 what we call double first cousins.
Huh.
And so they were like my brothers growing up. And we all played hockey, and we all rode bikes, and we all built stuff and had crazy adventures together. And we were very much lower middle class, but we didn't hurt for anything.
Mm.
We had adventure beyond our wildest
Well, and it
dreams.
sounds like you had such a community of friends with your family.
Yeah.
That is unusual.
Yeah. And so we had a really, and grew up in sort of a small town just outside of, the west end of Ottawa. And so, church and, going to, it's called Brigade. It's kind of like a Awana sort of type program for boys, though it was specifically just for boys. And grew up doing that together. And so it was really good and really enjoyable. And about when I was 12 or 13, we changed churches, and we went to a Reformed Presbyterian church, which it was tough on my sisters and I would say. It didn't go well, very much a hard knock church, very much a legalistic, very, very legalistic church. Not terrible people, good people, just very legalistic church. And I think that was tough. I think that was really tough on a lot of things. I went to a private Christian school from 5th to 8th grade, and then I moved into high school. And I went to public high school and then played on high school hockey team and all of those things. And but growing up was good. I didn't have time really to party. I didn't have time to get really into drugs or any of that stuff because I was either hunting, I was fishing, or I was playing hockey.
Well, and it sounds like you had such a tight community of friends, and there was a lot of bonded relationships there.
Yeah.
My experience is a lot of both rebellion and addiction are the result of unresolved emotional pain, feeling alone, feeling like there's nobody there for you. And it sounds like you had a very tight network of family and friends.
Yeah. So if we look forward and then pull the frame back a little bit, we've come to understand that Dana is an Enneagram 4, which whether or not you believe in the Enneagram, whatever, it doesn't matter. But Enneagram 4, which is much more the creative, individualist, and very in tune emotionally. And I didn't know that at the time, right? Like you can kind of, I didn't really understand that. And now that we look at my family history and we're coming out of world wars and all of those things, it's kind of, and my dad grew up very poor, like the Salvation Army dropping off Christmas gifts every Christmas kind of thing. Barely enough, food on the table. And my dad doesn't like oatmeal anymore because he ate that for 150 meals in a year and just those type of things. And there really isn't space for your feeling, your emotion, your understanding, and so my dad and his brother started a roofing company and they did a great job keeping that going. And that's what fed our family. But for me, there's gaps, like every kid, and I'm not putting blame, but it's one of those things where there's gaps. And I was an emotionally sensitive young man playing a tough sport of hockey. Yeah. And so very much felt the game, very much could understand the emotion in the game, didn't understand what that was at the time. I was just very connected, and I could really sit in a room and kind of grasp what other people were feeling, and I didn't really understand that at the time or what that was. And so it was just a different season of life and a good season. And so I got to being 18, 17, and I suffered a lot of concussions. I'm not a big guy. I'm just under 6 feet, but I'm in high school was 154 pounds soaking wet on a good day. And so I ended up with, 9 concussions, which concussions really weren't a big thing back then. Yeah. It wasn't until I got to the hospital and they opened up the folder and they were like, oh, we're going to send you to Montreal and you're going to deal with the neurosurgeon there. And we're going to do baseline testing, which was really new. This is like, 2000 that they're trying to, that's pretty early on in the concussion protocol stuff. And so that was the end of hockey for me. It really wasn't meant to be for me. And like every kid's dream, I want to go to college. I want to play in the NHL. I want to do all those things. But really, I just wasn't big enough, and so kind of in a random turn of events, I was driving, it was low. I was bored. I played hockey 7 days a week, 3 to 4 hours a day. So it was very much an identity. And I was driving my sister and her friend to the mall one time, and her friend really good at singing, very good at singing. And I was joking around singing with the radio or something like that. And she, Dana, why don't you take some singing lessons? And I thought, there's no chance in the world I'm going to take singing lessons. I'm a hockey player, And whatever, let the moment go. And a couple weeks later, she comes back around again. And Dana, why don't you take some singing lessons? I don't know, it just hit me differently. And I thought, well, I'm really bored. I got nothing else to do. All right, let's take some singing lessons. And I remember going downstairs one time, and this old sort of, really aging myself, cassette tape recorder, and it had a microphone that plugged into it, and I recorded myself singing. I was like, whoa, that's terrible. That's awful. And anyways, ended up taking some singing lessons, moved through this somewhat quickly, but which led to a group of us going to Disney World in Orlando, Florida, singing for a summer. And that was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that. And then what kind of came out of that was I got an invitation to go to Vancouver and sing with a couple other guys there, and took up that invitation, and that was really hard. My parents, I came home, and my parents were like, we really believe God's calling you to do this. That was hard. I love home. I'm a homebody. I'm still a homebody. I've always been a homebody. I didn't want to leave. I had no intention of leaving home. And it was just this weird thing that God put on my heart, put on my parents' heart, and I cried the whole 5-hour flight to Vancouver. And that didn't work out with those guys, and I thought I'd move home. And instead I got involved in a really good church there and a really good young adults group, and then I met a girl. It's always the way it happens, right?
There you go.
Met a girl, a girl named Julie, and I stayed. And I stayed for 2.5 years while we dated, and my music started there, and I started getting the opportunity to lead worship with the young adults group and just start writing songs and messing around with demos and messing around with music. And one day, just all these things sort of came together. But I got a letter from Benson and Brentwood Publishing and a guy named Ed Key, who I 10 years later thanked, and he had no idea. He wrote the letter, but he wrote me a 2-page single-space letter about songwriting and how I needed to come to Nashville. And so Julie and I got married, and her parents were fired up. 2 days later, we moved to Nashville, and now I can understand their heartbreak. Back then, I was like, what's the big deal? I'm 20 years old, and what's the big deal? Well, no big deal, and that was, but we moved here with 2 suitcases. And
so one dream died playing hockey.
Yeah.
And another dream was born.
Yeah.
Which was what? Being a worship leader or writing songs? I mean,
both.
I know those two things.
Yeah,
work together.
They kind of work together. And I got into I moved here, and I would travel around a bunch. And those first few years of being married were wonderful and also hard. Julie and I got here, and the first thing we did was get a 2-bedroom apartment in Antioch. Not the greatest part of town, if you know Nashville at all. It's just a rough part of town, and it wasn't great. So we did 1 year there, and we moved to Franklin and been here ever since. But yeah, one dream died with the hockey, and I still play men's hockey and pick up hockey and love it. But I picked up another dream of songwriting, and that was really fun. And I ended up writing Christian music for a little while, and then I realized that really wasn't what I wanted to do either. I really loved leading worship, and I loved songwriting, but I didn't care to write Christian songs. And so had some success enough to be able to do it for 12 years and really enjoy it. And got to do some really awesome things and wrote songs with some really great people. And
now you toured for a while as well, right?
And I toured for a while and got taken on the road by other artists to open for them. And I'd play with a loop pedal and do those kind of things. I got to play the Grand Ole Opry a couple times, which was really special.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And so, yeah. And then sort of the wheels fell off, and then we kind of get into life was good, and then it wasn't. And it's interesting, Ken. It's like everybody used to tell, I used to say, I don't really have a crazy conversion story. Or, when I was 5, I prayed a prayer with my mom and I grew up in the church but my faith really wasn't my own. It was really my parents. It's really my dad. And it started with Julie getting pregnant. And I remember, it's funny, people don't talk about these things. And at this point in our life, we didn't really talk too much about it, but we sat in an office and we were really excited Julie was pregnant. And then the doctor comes in and she won't look at us and she's kind of looking at the floor. And I'm like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat, and there's a baby there, but there's no heartbeat. And that was the first kind of shoe to drop. And that was really painful. And I don't want to go one by one. I'll just kind of list these off because you kind of lump them together. It's a season of life. And then Julie's diagnosed with melanoma and they do surgery. And there are miracles within all of these things. And I'll come back to that I want to share that. But Julie's diagnosed with melanoma. My parents, married for 36 years, get separated and then eventually divorce. We end up with another miscarriage. And then Julie ends up with stage 4 metastatic melanoma, which is tumors in her lymph nodes that have broken open and are now metastasized through her body. And we start going, and you just layer these things on and layer these things on. And what I was taught was, you suck it in and you toughen up. You suck it in and you toughen up until you don't. And it came down to a morning, I remember waking up, I rolled over and I just looked at Julie and I was like, I think I'm done getting out of bed. And I meant it. I really meant it. I was taught to be a fixer.
Yeah.
Fix it. I was pretty handy. I love flipping houses. I'm dangerous enough to do electrical and plumbing and all those things and just enough to be dangerous, but I couldn't fix it anymore. The fix it was over. And I rolled over. I had had enough. I was done. In the words of my 8-year-old son, I was cooked.
Yeah.
And so Julie knew, and man, we talked about in your story a little bit, just our wives and their intuition. And when, Julie's not real pushy, she's so gentle and so kind and so just, and she knew in that moment it wasn't time for that anymore. It was time to get help. And so we got help, and she found me counseling through the Music Cares Fund, and we have wonderful. There's a program here for musicians that can get counseling, and musicians aren't usually all that well off, and so counseling can be expensive, and so. Yeah. But I ended up going and getting counseling, and we started that. But in that journey, you start just peeling off these layers of I can't fix it anymore, and once you start with the beginning, it starts to peel back all the layers of, well, you can't fix it. Well, who are you? Well, why are you so emotional? Well, why are you this? Well, why are you that? And it just starts heaping on the shame on top of that you can't fix it and all these other problems that you have to start venturing back into who am I? Is God good? Does God even care? Is he ambivalent? Does he, I thought he was on my side. And then we had one son, we had Kai in 2012, and that was sort of just before, that was right after Julie's first cancer diagnosis. And we were good to go and everything was fine for a while, right? And so they cut the cancer out of Julie's arm, this first diagnosis, and they did a surgery. And one of the miracles in that was really interesting at that time was we had a guy at our church who was one of the dermatologists for Vanderbilt Hospital. And he saw it, and Julie was like, I have this weird bubble on my arm that's clear, and it used to be a freckle, and now it's covered over, and da-da-da. Anyways, so he got us in right away. And I was on the road, and I flew back and met Julie at Vanderbilt, and we went in, and they cut it off, and comes back as melanoma. And he says, well, you're going to need surgery. We're going to need to do Mohs surgery. Which means they take a pretty large section of skin out of your body. And so she has a pretty large section of her left arm that they cut out. So we get to the hospital, and I meet the surgeon that's going to do the surgery, and she's there. And I was like, hey, could I just ask you a weird question? I'm from Canada, and I don't really understand the American healthcare system. Yeah. How much is this going to cost? And she looks at me, and she goes, you know what? You're so-and-so's friend. And she's like, and I'm leaving for Hawaii in 6 hours on a plane. This one's on me.
Wow.
So she did the surgery for free.
Wow.
It's like, holy moly. And so we finished the surgery, and I talked to the hospital, and they're like, we'll mail you the hospital bill. And I get the hospital bill, and it's something, $3,000 something to be there for the couple hours we were there to get the surgery. I get the bill, and I call the hospital. I'm like, can I set this up on a payment plan? And she goes, yeah. Can I get that bill again? She goes, you know what? Someone came in today and paid that in cash in full.
Wow.
The account's closed. And I can go through and we can talk through a lot of really heavy trauma that really hurts, but I also want to underline the fact that through these things, God did show up. And I want to make that very clear. He did. And at the time, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I was hurting so bad. I was so depressed, and I was so lost that I just couldn't see the forest for the trees, you know?
Dana, man, I am so sorry for all the pain that you guys have experienced.
Mm.
And I love you emphasizing that fact that God showed up even when you didn't have capacity to respond to it or acknowledge it.
Or be grateful for it.
Yeah. I mean, he met you in that. And I think a lot of the dynamic of that is because he knows our heart. And he knows truly who you are. And he can see beyond the lack of overt gratitude or appreciation, or where he meets us right where we are. And that's just an amazing part of your story.
Yeah. So thank you. So we kind of get through that, and we have a son named Kai, and he is awesome and wonderful. And when he's 2, my parents separated, and I hadn't talked to my dad in maybe 2 years. And in the middle of all this, my dad falls off a roof at a lake house in the middle of nowhere and smashes his iPhone, and it's shattered. And for some reason, it works well enough that he's laying on the ground and can make a phone call. He's by himself on an island at a lake house. This is not like this is a remote area. So they life flight him back to the hospital, and I get a phone call, and he's broken 7 ribs and punctured his lung. And you know, we haven't talked in a long time. And, it's one of those things that's really hard, you know, something that's very hard to talk about. And, you know, and my dad and I have a good relationship today. I want to say that, but in that season of life, it's very hard to see somebody that you look up to, that you consider Superman, to be so broken in many ways.
Not just physically. Yeah.
And, you know, and so I just, with counseling and help, and just decided we were going to part ways for a while here so that we could get some healing in this scenario and let my dad work through his stuff, and I need to work through my stuff. And when you puncture your lung and break ribs, they put a tube to drain your chest cavity, because otherwise it fills up with blood. And I guess what happened was the hospital removed it far too soon, and they sent him home, and he ended up with sepsis. And sepsis kills a very high percentage of people. And he ended up with sepsis back in the hospital. And I got a phone call that it was time to come home and say goodbye because he was going to die from sepsis. And I remember praying with Kai, and one night we were praying for Grandpa Jay, and Kai kind of pops up. He's 2, pops up as a prayer. He's like, "Who's Grandpa Jay?" Oh, and that was a really, really hard moment in my life to realize that all the good things about my dad, my son wasn't getting to know. And we get this phone call, and I've got to go to Evansville, Indiana to lead worship. And I'm in Evansville leading worship, and Julie calls me, and she's like, you need to fly home now. So I get on stage and I lead worship. It's the worst moment of my life. One of them, I would say, by getting on stage and leading worship. And I get a flight out of Evansville. Julie and Kai drive up. All 3 of us fly to Ottawa, and we land at like 1 a.m. And Julie and Kai go back to my mom's house, and I go to the hospital to see my dad. And my dad, only thing I can come up with is like, if you've ever seen someone really demon possessed, that's what it's like. They have him tied to the bed, and he is tremoring because the blood's attacking his brain. And he comes out of it for 10 seconds. "Oh, Bud," he calls me Bud. "Bud, you're here." Right back. Traumatic, awful, worst thing you'll ever see in your life. And I get there and I stay at the hospital that night. And Julie goes to my mom's house, and Julie had worked out the day before, and she's like, "Man, my left arm," which is where she had the surgery, "oh, it's so sore." And she touches her armpit, and the tumor just comes out. And Julie knows immediately what this is. And for 2 weeks, she doesn't say a word to me while we nurse my dad back to health. And they approve some trial drug that saved my dad's life. They'd given him all the antibiotics he was ever allowed to have. And they finally the Surgeon General of Canada signs off on a trial drug that was like some crazy $100,000 drug that they tried it out on him, and it saved his life and got rid of the sepsis. So my dad recovers. We hang out in the hospital for a long period of time, and we get on the airplane to go home from this, and Julie goes and reaches and grabs my hand and goes, "I got something to tell you." Julie grabs my hand and she goes, "There's something wrong." I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "I have a tumor in my left armpit, and I know the cancer's back. And man, I'm a fixer. I can fix it. I can't fix it. And I can't fix my wife's fear and my own fear. I can't put on armor to fix this. I can't jump in front of a bullet and fix this. There's nothing we get home, and that same doctor says, "Come in tomorrow. We're going to biopsy this immediately, scan it, biopsy it." Biopsies, by the way, are just awful. They literally stick a needle straight into her armpit, straight into the tumor, and pull out core samples.
Oof.
So she ends up with, she's a detailed person. I'm not. 5 centimeter, two 5 centimeter tumors, maybe. There's 2 tumors. And again, it just sets me back into this whole, I have a counselor, and I'm starting to learn words, and I'm starting to learn some verbiage into who I am and who God made me to be, but I don't have the tools. And my prayers go something like this: "God, I'll be damned if my son's going to grow up without a mom." And that begins a very long fight with me and God of, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
I don't trust you. And it's interesting. The rug was just being pulled out every which way, right? My home life, my parents separated, divorced, my dad struggling to stay alive. Now Julie's falling apart. And why? I mean, I don't understand this. I don't get why all these things happening at one time, And so we go in and have surgery, and Julie has another surgery, and it goes from being a 2.5-hour surgery to a 6-hour surgery, as I guess the tumors they grow these called extracapillary extensions, in other words, tentacles, and they wrap all around her blood vessels, all the way in her arm. And they have to very carefully unattach all these tentacles and pull them off her blood vessels. And then they proceed to take every lymph node that they can find in her left armpit. And I sit down with the doctor, and he comes out of surgery, and we're talking, and Julie's maid of honor, who's a nurse in Canada, had come down to help me take care of Julie, and Julie's mom came down to take care of Kai. And just to be honest with you, I was kind of useless. I didn't know what to do. When you're a fix-it guy, when you're a suck-it-in and toughen-up guy, and when you can't do any of those things, what do? You hide. You pout. What do you do, right? You find medicators, something to relieve the pressure, anything at all. God, I will do anything right now to relieve this pressure. And I wasn't really into drinking, so I became crazy depressed, right? And the doctor comes out, and this was something that has clung to me for many years, and I have worked through a lot of counseling, but he said, Dana, this cancer is in Julie's body now, and because it got into her lymph nodes, that's the map of your body, and all your lymph nodes are connected. And he said, so now it's going to travel, and wherever it shows up next, he's like, if it shows up again, and if it shows up on a major organ, Julie has maybe a 10% chance of survival of that. Wow. And I can say it now, and I can hold that. But man, you give that to a guy that doesn't know what to do with that, and that's just like swallowing poison.
Yeah. Because
you end up having to hold on to this thing, and what do I do with that? And man, that just hung on to me for so long. It just became a part of who I was. I would drive around when I was real depressed and real low. My darkest moments, I would drive around and I would plan Julie's funeral in my mind as I would drive around. Just going, okay, well, how are we going to do this? And what am I going to do here? And there are still moments that I have in my life that are low, and I can go to that, and praise the Lord, I'm much healthier now, and I've had a lot of help since then, and I have gotten through a lot of counseling. And I don't do that as much now, and I can stop it on a dime. But I see it, and I know it, and I can mark it and go, well, okay, what's going on here? Why am I here? And so Julie started a long process of studying and understanding this cancer. And she did some crazy stuff, and juicing and dietary restrictions and all these different things. And then some localized radiation. And we're 12 years cancer-free, which was, it's so interesting. We walk into her oncologist, and her oncologist, she goes, "You're my little miracle."
Yeah, literally.
And I could say that now, but those 12 years, there's a lot of hell to walk through.
Well, and I can't imagine it's completely over for you. Is there this lingering fear that you have that this is going to come back? I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I would say it gets less and less.
The longer it goes?
The longer it goes, but it's not a distance and a time thing. You and I both know that. Yeah. Distance and time, they're not going to make that go away. No. It's that I've chosen to face it and gone, okay, even if.
Yeah.
All right, God, what does that look like? And even if, but we're not there. And instead, I'm going to choose today, and I'm going to choose right now. I'm going to choose this moment. I have 3 healthy kids, and I have a healthy wife. And so that doesn't take away that fear, but what it does do is gives me the opportunity to choose to look towards gratitude instead of, there's the box of the other shoe could drop. And with good counseling and with good help and with close friends, I choose to put that backpack in the corner, and I choose not to wear it. Is it there? It's there.
Yeah.
It exists.
I love that, because to say what you just said, choosing gratitude and leaving that backpack in the corner, to say that to somebody without having that personal experience would feel so trite and so minimizing.
Yeah.
But for you to be able, I mean, that's what you believe. And for you having been there in that just shows the integrity of that process in a way, Dana, that I think has got to be so helpful. Because I can only imagine that there's a bunch of guys listening to this who have been through something similar and felt the very same feelings and just did not know what to do with them and felt paralyzed by it. And while all that's true for you, you kept going, you kept walking. And I think, I have chronic pain as well. And the one thing that I've learned in this last year and a half is you take it a day at a time and one step at a time.
Yeah.
And as trite as that might sound, it's just true.
Right.
And it takes a lot of effort and discipline to not let your mind go to those catastrophic places, and to stay present and to stay in the moment, that, and to trust that God is in control of the outcome of this in a way that you are not and I am not. And that gives some sense of comfort. It doesn't fix it. It leaves it in that real day-by-day dependence state. But you're a walking, you and Julie are just a walking example of that.
Well, thank you. I don't, it's funny because we talk about it right now and we're very much short forming some of this.
Yeah.
There are days, weeks, months that go by that I don't do well with it, but I'm honest about it. When I went through some of that and got a lot of counseling and a lot of help. And when I went to Onsite, and so this is what kind of led me up into 2017, I ended up going to Onsite to basically what I called 2 years of counseling in a week, or what I like to call
it's intensive.
Or open heart surgery.
Yeah.
But I realized a lot of things about myself. I realized that I had very little to no grace for myself. Like zero. I can be gracious for other people, but for myself, there was none. There was no latitude whatsoever. I also learned a lot about the connection of the struggle that I had with men have an unfair deal with this, but who their earthly father is so deeply woven to who their heavenly father is. And our connection and our struggle with who God is because of the shortcomings of our earthly father can be a hard web to unweave.
Yeah.
And so kind of pulling the frame back on a lot of those things and allowing myself the space, and then also the space to just grieve. What does that look like? Why do I have to cry? Well, if I start crying, this sounds really dumb, but if I start crying, will I ever stop?
Yeah.
That's a weird thing to say. And as a dude, it's like, ooh, so good. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, sure. The bravado only goes so far.
Yeah.
It only goes so far. And then the trauma takes over. And it doesn't matter what you do. For any guy out there that's listening to this, it may be one massive trauma and it may be 200 little ones that you just kind of wanted to do as water under the bridge. They're the same thing. Yeah. They're the same thing. They hold the same weight. And so, yeah, we marched along and Julie got healthy again and Julie got pregnant again and we lost another baby. Which it's a weird thing for a guy. For the guys listening to this, many guys' wives have had miscarriages. I would say many guys and many wives have never talked about it, which is mind-boggling to me because I truly believe, much like you had spoken about, Ken, those are kids we're going to meet.
Yeah.
Like, they have a name. They have a place in heaven. They had a heartbeat. And I didn't do that well either. And how do you know what to do when your wife loses a baby? I had no connection to that child. I didn't really lose. Did I lose something? Did I ever have something? What do I do with that? How do I feel that out? My wife's crying and she's upset, but what do I do with that? And I remember Julie crying one day, somewhat upset. We were driving, and this is just how arrogant I was. But there's a reason. Again, men aren't just arrogant because they choose to be arrogant. There's hurt that they're denying and they're hiding from, which we can get into a whole nother time. But Julie goes, well, today would have been, this baby's birthday. And my immediate response was, you're still upset about that? Was that me trying to push her away, or was that me hiding from my own hurt? That's me hiding from my own pain. That's me going, oh, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to push you away. And that's what I did. I pushed my wife away. And 6 years later, I am in Alberta elk hunting. And I get on the plane to come home. And, you get this more than anybody can. When you have a lot of quiet time in the woods, which is what we do in Montana and what's going to happen here, it's funny, God just speaks. Yeah. Out of nowhere, if we just shut up and get quiet and be still. And I get on the plane and God goes, I want you to apologize for what you said to Julie, specifically about that miscarriage. And I went, no, it's in the past. I don't need to do that. I don't need to apologize for that. God, please, I don't want to bring that back up. That's past hurt. We're going to let it go. And I went to the hunt camp 2 weeks later, and I said it to my friend. And I said, yeah, this is wild. I said, this is what God wants me to do. And he said, are you kidding me? I felt the exact same prompting because I treated my wife the exact same way when she had a miscarriage. And I knew I needed to go home and apologize. And I went home and I apologized. And Julie cried and she went through some anger. Yeah. She was mad 6 years later because that wound was just as fresh when I brought it back up. Mm-hmm. But there was so much healing that was done in that moment. And so I'm bouncing around a little bit with you, but we end up having 2 more kids, and then our last baby was a girl, and Julie got her wish and her dream, and I prayed so hard that baby would be a girl because I was like, oh my goodness, Lord, she's been through so much, and her body has been through so much trauma. Please give her that desire. Like, if anybody deserves it, it's her. Yeah. And so we have Abby, and she's our third, and she is a joy, just pure joy. I call her Abby Sugar because she's just pure joy. And in the midst of all that hurt, our second boy had some issues and some behavioral issues. And again, I went through more things. I can't fix it. And a lot of people in this circumstance was, oh, it's fine. God created this. But Will turned out to be 80% deaf, and he had behavioral issues, and it was frustrating. And he got to 2 years old, and I was mad because he was always so angry because he couldn't communicate. Turned out he needed hearing aids and he was deaf, and I blamed myself. I blamed myself. Maybe he was sick and I didn't catch it. Be a fixer, Dana, be a fixer. If it's a fixer, if you can't fix it, it's your fault. And that's a theme that was woven throughout all these issues and all these struggles. Yeah. And Will got hearing aids, and I grieved that. Oh, man, I remember sitting in Columbia, Tennessee in a sandwich shop and finding out from that phone call from Julie that was the issue, and I bawled by myself in that. I bawled. Just another thing. But all these things, I've only realized at 40, maybe 41 years old, now I'm 42, God was softening my heart to go, Dana, you are a sensitive man that loves the Lord, that can use these things to show and lead other men in that way. We've done a lot of work together, you and I, Ken, and it's taken me a lot of years to not be ashamed of who I am, and not push that away, and not with one hand hold that closet door closed and go, I'm not that emotional guy. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to be emotional. I'm not going to talk about sensitive things. I'm not going to da 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 da. And the truth was that whole time, God's like, I'm going to break you down. I'm going to tear you apart. And then I'm going to put you back together. And I'm in the season of hopefully, I'm hoping he's going to put me back together. But this last year has been hell on earth. I've been through 4 surgeries, culminating in a major spine surgery where they replaced an entire disc in my back, which, man, that's most pain I've ever felt in my life. As I woke up out of surgery, I was in pain, and I have some gene that doesn't process narcotics well, and I was in a lot of pain. And the blessing in that is I had men in my life that showed up, that walked me through that. You know, as I have realized and come to grow and become a stronger man, I have found other men that want that same vulnerability, that wanted to lower me down through the roof to Jesus and go, all right, I got you on this one. I called Patrick one day, week 10, week 11 after surgery, and I was fully convinced, Ken. I said to Patrick, I said, I think my family's better off without me. Mm. My wife doesn't need a man that's so broken in a healthy, like health-wise, back pain and Lyme's disease, which is another thing that I've struggled with. And Patrick stopped and he said, Dana, you're going to make me cry. And he said, but Dana, that's from the pit of hell, man. Like, your boys need you. Abby needs you. And in that moment, I was like, I got nothing to offer. I can't fix it again. I can't put it back together. I can't make it right. And that's been a theme throughout. Dana, you're not to fix it. You don't get to determine the outcome of how things go. And that's a hard pill to swallow. We want to determine the outcome. We want to control it. We want to make sure we know what goes on and what happens in our lives. And instead, I've been a man who has had to relinquish that control for the last 15 years of my life and go, okay, God, I don't know. I don't know.
There's something in a lot of men, I struggle with this too, but it's something I've noticed is that if we can't fix something or be something or do something, that's all we're really good for. And that what Patrick said to you, that, you know, your children need you. They need you. You are enough for them as their father, as a man in their life, regardless of what you do or don't do.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest lesson to learn as we get older as men is to embrace the reality of our own limitations and our own weaknesses and our own dependency. We run from that until we can't, until life circumstances just knock us down, or we get to an age where we just physically can't do the things that we used to be able to do. And you can pretend that's not true and do things, and then you pay the price for it, or you turn to things that then rob the relational capacity that you need to have with your family. And so much of it is just this attempt to avoid the truth that we are just frail human beings that can't do everything. We need others. And I think that's, one of the themes I'm hoping emerges from our podcast here is not only that we can talk and model what brotherhood looks like, but that we can provide a map for other guys in order for them to find that themselves. Because to your point, man, life is going to throw us unbelievable curveballs, and we absolutely cannot, in a healthy way, respond to those by ourselves. It's just not possible. And just the fact that you actually reached out to Patrick on that day at a very dark moment for you, and that he was able to meet you in that and respond to you that way. Gosh, that is just what a gift that is.
Yeah, it's interesting too. God has gifted me men in my life that at the same moment in time, we were all ready to sort of take those next steps. It's interesting. We sort of started becoming closer when we started the book, that Chippewa book, Voices of the Heart. We did it as a group of 5 guys. And that was sort of the gateway of going, there's verbiage to what's going on. And then it also created a safe place where we could go, hey, I'm not all right. And the other guy not go, man, I got the perfect Bible verse to fix this.
Right.
No. When you walk through enough stuff in life, and when you've had enough hardships in life, your response to other people's hardships isn't hurry. It's to slow down. And for guys listening to this, when there are other people in your life that are hurting or go through a very traumatic event, they don't need a Bible verse. They don't need you to tell them why you should be thankful. I'd rather punch someone in the face before they tell me why I need to be thankful.
Right.
What a guy who's going through trauma needs is the same thing that Jesus promises us. I'll be with you when you go through deep waters. Just with. That's it. It's not, I will fix it. It's not, I will change your dynamic. I will put in front of you all the things you should be. No, I'm with you. Mm-hmm. When someone is alone in their deathbed and they're about to die, they don't care about anything other than what they want someone to be with them. That presence is what changes things. And that is what God has been teaching me in my story of all this trauma of struggle and hurt and pain and physical pain inside of me and deep emotional pain. It has been, I have a deep passion and a deep longing for other men to know the depths of what a relationship can do with other guys to help you. Yes, I get it. Jesus is the answer, the way, the truth, all those things. I get that. But I also believe that God has given us each other for the road. And that's why I truly believe in finding other men in our lives to walk with that, was it David and Jonathan took their armor off?
Yeah, Jonathan took his off and gave it to David.
And David could kill him. David could hurt him.
Yeah.
David could do, and instead, what did they do? They became friends.
Yeah.
To take that armor off in front of each other, that's what I'm so passionate about other men learning in this life. And that's what I hope this podcast does. That's what I hope God puts me in some way, shape, or form to do for other men, is to provide that place for them and to be that. Because that's what changes lives. That's what changes families. Yeah. And that's what brings men back from the pit of hell, is carrying them back to the feet of Jesus gently and knowing them well enough that they trust you to do that. Not beating them over the head with a Bible, but trusting that you're going to listen to them and not shame them, because they're coming from a world of hurt too.
And when we share our story with others, that they then allow that dynamic to happen, mm-hmm. because they know you get it.
You've been there.
You've been there. And I think that's one of the ways, Dana, that God redeems tragedy, pain, and suffering, is that he brings us to a place where we are willing to enter into that with others based upon what we have experienced and the comfort which God has given us in the midst of that. We tend to resist that comfort for a period of time. But once we start allowing ourselves to actually embrace it, and internalize it as presence, as God's love for us, not that he's angry with us or punishing us because of those things. It's a reorientation. And it just reminds me of something Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians. That's just in my own life. This has been something that God has brought up again and again and again. Chapter 1, verse 3, he says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ flow over into our lives, so also through Christ our comfort overflows." And one of the things I love about this is that Paul is really shining a light on the fact that God himself is not distant from suffering. He experienced it. Obviously, Jesus experienced it. But together, that the triune community in the incarnation and the crucifixion and the joy of the resurrection and the restoration of all things one day that will be so, God is in the middle of all of that. And I don't think anyone can ever shake an angry fist at heaven and say, "God, you don't get it. You don't know what I'm going through." All Jesus does is he just shows us his hands and says, "No, I get it." And that's how he can be a high priest for us. That isn't trite. It isn't some glib cliche. There's no pat answer in here. There's no 3 verses and this all goes away and we tie a nice red bow on this. This is about life, and life is pain. And I don't say that as a fatalistic thing, but Jesus did not promise us a pain-free life.
No.
To your point a little while ago, he did promise to be with us in it.
Yeah.
And there is something about surrendering to that. Surrendering to, and it's not resignation, but it's a surrender that God is in control of the outcome. God is at work in this, even though I don't see it and I don't like it. And over the years, if we allow it, it can instruct us in a way that not only does it give us resilience in future pain and hardship and heartache, but it gives us capacity to hold space for those who are in the midst of it as well.
Well, and that's why I love so dearly just that line of saying lead with a limp. And it's also, honestly, I think it's a requirement.
Yeah.
It should be a requirement for men that you lead with a limp. And it's not that you got to run around and be Eeyore, but in the same token, men should be very, very acutely aware that are around you. Hey, man, you've been through some stuff. And the reason I say it and the reason I talk about it and the reason I'm open about it is because there's so many men that are walking absolutely dead.
Yeah.
Their heart is so hard. They are so out of tune. They're so frustrated and I'm just an angry guy. No, you're not just an angry guy.
Yeah.
You're a hurting guy. You're sad. You're upset. There are things that have hurt you that you have not dealt with. And instead, we choose anger, right? Because we can control the anger.
Yeah.
And that's where I went. I was like, I'm going to be angry because I can control it and I can be mad when I want to be mad. But if I cry, I can't control crying. Crying is sorrow.
Yeah.
Crying is uncontrollable and it will end when it ends.
Yep.
And it will see. But if we dam it up, all those tears, we become angry, bitter, resentful human beings. And I choose not that way for my life. And that's what my goal is for the rest of my life, is to spend helping other men not become that. Because I did it for a moment. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's an awful place to live.
Well, Dana, thank you for just your willingness just to be raw and to share with us just the heartache and the pain and the sorrow and the laments that you and Julie have experienced so much of. and just knowing you and being your friend there's just such an encouragement there for me, because I know that when I come to you with pain and hardship, I know what I'm going to get.
Mm.
I'm not going to get a fix it. I'm going to get an entering into it. And guys, that's what we hope to be for you in this podcast, that we can be a place where you can not only process and listen and not feel alone, but be understood, but also to be equipped to deal with the harsh realities of life. And, we don't have it all figured out for sure. We're on the journey together, but that's what we're inviting you guys into on this podcast. We're inviting you into this journey together. And I think we're always better together, to coin a phrase. And I'm grateful to be able to do this with you. So
Likewise.
thanks so much. Guys, thanks for joining us in hearing Dana's story. We've got some great episodes coming up that we're looking forward to giving to you and for your feedback to us. So until next time, God bless.